Hey, what's up, everybody? Will here. Excited. I have another interview. This interview today is with Will Slappey. He's the CEO of IT Voice. I'm excited to get to know Will. Our last interview was with Stephen Smith of Old Dog Technology, who is a startup MSP, just getting really launched and off the ground. But today I have an interview with Will Slappey. Again, he is the CEO of IT Voice. They've been around for over 30 years. I'm excited. If you don't know Will, follow him on LinkedIn. He's always sharing some great wisdom with us. And I'm excited to see what he's got to share with us today, guys. So take a listen, take a watch. I'll be looking forward to your feedback. Take care. Hey, Will, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. It's we haven't really this I think our first time really getting to meet each other, so this is pretty cool. But everybody knows me at this point, I believe. Can you though, Will, introduce yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. Will Slappey. I am the CEO for IT Voice. And a little bit of kind of about us. So we've got 14 locations across 11 states, heavy in the Southeast, Midwest, but go as far out as like California to the west side and Wyoming to the northwest side of things. Four primary lines of business. So the classic MSP or managed IT space, of course, cloud, voice and internet, and then security, including both physical security and cybersecurity.
Wow. Extensive. That's a lot. So I think I saw that your father founded IT Voice. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's right. Yeah, so founded back in the 80s, so about 41 years old this year.
Wow.
And yeah, back in the day when we originally founded was actually more on the telephony side, the business. And there wasn't really much in terms, I mean, MSPs didn't exist right in the 80s.
Mhm.
And so it was more in just low voltage technology. And, end of the 90s and early 2000s started getting more into the networking and then eventually IT space.
Okay. And how did you kind of just I think I saw a comment you wrote that I'm about my father's business, right? And I thought that was such a great line. How did you though get into IT Voice? Was this something you always wanted to do, or did you just, how did that come about?
Yeah, so growing up, it was never like I'm going to take over the business, and thankfully there was no pressure like from my father to do that either.
Mhm.
I did work in the business growing up, so even as like early as the age of 5, I was like going to the business, sweeping the warehouse floor. Like back in the day, tickets, used to be paper tickets, right? And
Mhm.
so I'd be like filing those paper tickets and order and like buy customer and all that jazz. Later, was doing everything from pulling cable to refurbing old equipment, and later got into accounting and entering all of the accounting information, and then hopped into sales and operations, and
Right.
really just did it on the side to as a way of one I guess early years my father probably more or less made me, but then later on was a great opportunity to be able to earn money and do the things that I wanted to do. Ended up working part-time for the company actually all the way through college, but um, long story short, kind of pivoted after graduating from college. And so while I was kind of pivoting, my father said, well, hey, just come work in the business for me. I got some projects you can do, stay busy while you're, working on your next thing. And the next thing I knew, I was loving doing it, and kept getting deeper and deeper. And then about 2014 time, took over running the day-to-day operation of the company. So I've been doing that for about 10 years now.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. So you really got to, play a part in I think every role almost in the company, right? And I'm
Yeah,
sure that,
pretty much, pretty
yeah,
much.
and I'm sure
Yeah,
that like
everything
led to your
everything from
ability.
programming a firewall to running cable to entering financial transactions.
Oh wow, wow, okay. And so like, do you think that that's helped you? Obviously, I'm sure becoming because now you're a CEO, right? You're in charge of almost 14 different locations. I think it was 14. You said, right?
Yep.
How many employees is that?
A little bit north of 200 employees.
200 employees. Wow. So that's, pretty large, sizable company. Like, what is something that you think, did something help you along your journey that prepared you to this? Did you go to college for business administration? Like, what was it that you think that helped you and prepared you?
Yeah, so my degree was in behavioral economics, and it was through the School of Business. So as a part of that, of course, I got all the management and marketing and
Mm.
accounting and finance, et cetera, in doing that. So that definitely was, helpful. Growing up in the business, I mean, I watched my father do it, from the kitchen table or while I was working in the business, saw it as well. So, had a great mentor in him. When I was younger, actually, I went to the conferences and things like that with him. So, been going to conferences ever since I was probably 11 years old. So, some of the peers I still have today in the industry, I knew when I was like 11 years old. So
Wow.
it's kind of that's a neat thing. But as I got into more full time in the business, reading books has been super helpful. I mean, you have somebody that takes their life's experience and knowledge and decides to dump it into a 4 to 8 hour, condensed, version. Like, there's a lot to be gained from what you can read in a book. Podcast is another form. It's got a longer, form, stuff like that. What we're doing here, right? I'm listening to, people farther ahead. Peer groups have been tremendously impactful. There's a lot of different peer groups that are out there, whether you're doing a True Methods or an Evolve or any. I mean, there's a bunch of great ones that are out there, and that's been hugely impactful for me. And then mentors. I've had a lot of mentors along the way, and in the last 5 to 10 years, I've been even more strategic and specific about that, and really asking people. And usually, what I tell people, look for somebody that's 2 to 10 times the size of where you are. If you ask somebody way too big, you're probably not going to get a yes, just because it's kind of out. They're like, hey, there's a lot of other people that can help you. But 2 to 10 times the size, and then invite them to lunch. I mean, tell them, hey, look, I admire what you're doing, and you're farther along. Will you let me pick your brain, and will and help me with advice? And you can get an hour or two or whatever from those people, and you just keep asking. And so I've done that over the years and gotten a ton of free advice. I've had people even just like share information. Oh, here's a copy of our comp plan. Here's a spreadsheet that models that, like all those different things. So much of that I've gotten just simply by asking.
Wow, that's great. And I noticed like something you guys have posted on your website is that you have a customer retention rate of almost 99%, right? And that's amazing. I mean, for a company that's been around for so long, as many locations as you have, how is that possible? Like, what would you say is key to that, making that possible?
Yeah, so that's not like 99% since the beginning of time, right? So that we're measuring that each period. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, two things. I mean, one, our company was founded as a service company. Kind of our tagline is technology simplified, and that's ever since day one. That's been what the company has been about, and that's really about serving the company. My sales director routinely says, we are a service company peddling technology. And so that's kind of the DNA. Because it's like, hey, you could buy a lot of the stuff that we do, like on Amazon, right? And from a lot of different online sources. But ultimately, the value that we drive is from the service that we bring in as a total solution, to our customers. And so we spend a lot of time focusing on that. A lot of time hiring and recruiting the right people, creating the right environment internally, for employees to be able to thrive. So it's kind of that circle, like, hey, get good employees, create a great environment that people are passionate about what they're doing, stay really focused in on the customer, treat your customer well, create a great experience. And then they're willing to spend more with you. They're stay longer, buy more products. And then obviously as that invest back in the company, you can grow with more employees, and you just keep that circle kind of spinning.
So I love that. And that starts top down, right? That starts with you and your executives, your management team, and then goes down to the employees, which then goes in turn to the customers. How do you like, I hear all the time these people talk about culture, company culture. I'm a big Miami Heat fan. All we talk about is Heat culture, right? And so, but how is culture, like how can you tangibly create buy-in on culture other than just like slapping these things on the wall, or it's sending mass emails out? How do you tangibly create that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the same way inside of every organization. You talked about heat culture. I've certainly seen some of that. It seems like that organization has a really good, strong culture that's there. Everybody finds their own way. The way that I have found that I think is at least for me is the easiest way to do it is through rhythms. And part of the thing I love about the rhythms is that you can actually schedule and plan them, right? You can use recurring events inside of Outlook that you're driving on things, and so then those rhythms that you have help to drive that.
Can you clarify what a rhythm is for those that may not understand?
Yeah. So I'll give some examples of some things that we do. So one of the things that we do is like our all hands call, for example. So every Friday we have an all hands call, and it's all 200 plus employees, get on a Teams call all together. And before that call actually starts, we have 30 minutes that I open the all hands call chat, and encourage people to have shout outs and recognitions for each other. And so anybody can shout out and recognize anybody. With about 200 employees, we end up with about 300 to 500 per week. So that's usually ends up everybody getting recognized at least once, and many people multiple times. And then everybody who does get recognized, their name ends up on this thing called the Wheel of Names, and we spin it 4 times, and those 4 people get a $50 Amazon card. And so, we really try to encourage people to focus in on our core values. And we have this thing that's called the IT Voice Pledge. So the 4 values are like really simple, and they're very straightforward. And then there's 25 of the pledges that are, and I kind of tell people like the core values, the quick start guide to the culture, the pledges is more like the owner's manual. Because I can't even, like, off the top of my head trying to remember all 25. It's a lot to digest.
I know there was one that stood out to me. It was called "Be the Third Egg."
That's right.
What does that mean?
So let me come back to that to finish the all hands call. So we get everybody on the whole all hands call together, and so I recognize all 200 employees on their anniversary, and usually try to tell a story, thank them for their service. Again, this goes back to serving the customer, so they all get recognized. And then I tell a story that's like, hey, here's an example of somebody being the third egg that I'll tell you about in just a second. And then now, so 2 things are happening. One, I'm creating a culture of recognition by doing it, right? I'm modeling it for the employees. 2, I'm teaching them other parts about our culture because I'm telling a story of an employee who did something that modeled our culture, and that's teaching other people, oh, that's what that looks like to be a third egg, and that's a good example. So that's just one way, right? So I'll do like anniversary and birthday cards. I send those from the CEO to all of the employees, so they get 2 cards, drop an Amazon gift card, a little handwritten note, in the mail, so they get those. So that reinforces the culture that's there. When we do our reviews, we are looking at, part of the review process is measuring people on those core values and how that they're participating. We hire people based upon that. We fire people based upon that. Even in our offer letter, it includes what our core values, are about. And so, as the CEO, it's my job to incorporate the culture in everything we do. And it's everything from the meetings, the focuses, the language that we use inside of what we're doing. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like internal marketing. And actually, our marketing manager spends about half the time external and about half the time internal with, basically, we're marketing internally and like promoting these things and putting cool graphics together. You see Captain America behind me. That's one of our big, we have a theme every quarter that we push on, and we have a critical number, and we talk about it every single week in the all hands call, and we have rocks that support that critical number. You have to live them out and act them out from the top all the way down. You have to root out the people that don't fit into that, bring people in that do fit into that. And it's like a ball rolling down a hill, though, because once you get it going, it's hard to get going, especially if you don't have a good culture. But once you get it rolling, it begins to pick up its own momentum. And it's not just me pushing on it. My entire executive team is pushing on it. The management team is pushing on it. And all of the employees are pushing on it. And the people who don't want to be a part of it opt out and, go somewhere else. And then people who hear about it from the outside, I get pinged almost every week by somebody that wants to interview or interested in joining our team because they hear from others about, hey, it's a great place to be. So once you get it going, it not completely self-sustaining, because you as a leader always have to be focused in on it, but it becomes easier because you get that momentum going. Now, you asked the question about what is the third egg. So actually, this comes from my father from many, many years ago, and it comes from this interesting story. I won't give you the long version of the story, but essentially there's this guy that goes into a diner, and this one diner, there's 2 diners across the street. One diner everybody's at, the other diner nobody's at. And so the guy's trying to figure out, like, okay, what makes the difference? And he asks the owner, and the owner tells him it's the third egg. And he's like, well, what's the third egg? And he's like, well, when you go to a diner and you order eggs, you expect to get 2, but here we give you 3 eggs, we give you the third egg. And he says, hey, it only costs us like, a penny for an extra, this is an old story. It'd probably be like a dime or something now, right? But it only costs a very small amount for an extra egg, and it makes a great customer experience. And so that's kind of where the term rise. I like to use it because, getting back to the language, it is language that you wouldn't understand on the outside. You're like, what the mess does this mean, right? So when it's like that sort of exclusive language is a part of what builds into a good culture, where you have, like, it's like inside jokes, right? You have your inside language of what people understand and others. So then that makes people feel included as a part of get this culture. So I love to use like, you gotta be careful because sometimes when that gets external, then you can confuse customers. But I love everything from acronyms to little phrases and things that, make, this is part of the language in terms of, of who we are.
That's awesome. That's really great. That's a great, understanding of how to create culture, and that was pretty clear and practical. Thank you. I also noticed I followed you on LinkedIn for a while. I know you're also a husband, and you're a father of, I think, 3 children. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yep,
Yeah.
you got it right.
How do you like? How do you find work-life balance being a CEO such a large company too? At that.
To some extent, like I'll be overly kind of direct on this question because I'm pretty passionate about. I think there's this really big elephant in the room that everybody ignores,
Mhm.
and they look at it as if there's this huge struggle between work and life and the balance.
Mm.
And the elephant in the room is media. And media sucks out hundreds of hours from the average person's life every single year. And a lot of the media tells us things like work is not good, you should be striving to work less and spending more time in life and those kinds of things, which to some extent that's not necessarily a bad message. But work is really good. I love to work. That Some of the happiest people I know are people who love doing their job. I know a lot of people who have like retired or especially retired early, and then they go home and they're like home for 2, 3 months, and then they go stir crazy and they're like, I got to go do something.
Yeah.
One of the people actually on my executive team was like, had kind of done a semi-retired, and is like, he absolutely hated it. He was like, I mean, it basically didn't have a purpose like in life. I mean, he did, but it just was just not the same. So, but people are watching 2 to 3 hours, of media, whether it be social media, with Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or whatever it might be, or, movies and Netflix and, even watching the news. And like, that can just like, drown you in dismay. You watch the news for 30 minutes, right? So, there's just so much. And it's not that any of that's bad, right? I mean, I do watch a movie with the family from time to time, but you can literally easily, a lot of people waste 10 to 20 hours a week on that. So
Wow.
for the most part, I've cut that out. And so when you really cut that out, I actually did a post about kind of like my schedule on a weekly basis and what that looks like. But if you look at your schedule, you can easily work 50, and I'm usually like 50, 55, maybe 60 hours a week.
Mhm.
But like if you don't have media, then I'm like, I easily get like, 2 to 3 hours, night with the family, and
Mhm.
then 5 to 10 hours, well, like once you do Saturday and Sunday, it'd be like 10 to 20 hours with the family.
Mhm.
I'm still have plenty of time to, I usually cycle probably 5 hours a week,
Mhm.
as well. I mean, like you start adding it all up and you're like, and I still have time for personal disciplines and spiritual disciplines and,
Yeah, you
you
really do the
know,
math of 40 hours in a fraction of the week is really such a small fraction of
It
time.
it it really is,
Mhm.
and when you're trying to do 40 hours of work and 40 hours of media, then all of a sudden you don't have enough time. And that's where like you really do the math and you really sit down and say, and actually, I mean, even like, I mean, even like, and I'm not like a big like lunch person, like take a break. I know some people need that, and that's fine or whatever, but I usually just work through lunch or I go to lunch with somebody or whatnot. And I know everybody's different, and I know I'm a highly productive person that not necessarily everybody can. But
Mhm.
I've really found that, if you cut media out, you will have enough time to do the things that you want to. And I think media is not as good for you as work, and it's certainly not as good for you as
Well,
family and friends and
but what
other
would you
real life things.
right, but what would you say to the person that's, in a job that they don't really enjoy? Maybe they're stuck for whatever reason, with market or job market, whatever that is, or somebody that's running a business who their business is draining them, right? And it's not growing. Like, what about the person in that situation? What would you say to them?
So it depends on the scenario. So this is hypothetical, right? And so I'll try to answer the question the best that I can. Obviously, it's going to be different for each person. So let's take both of those kind of separately because I think they're two different situations. So, and this is a really tricky thing about life. You want to be passionate about what you're doing, and I'm a big person. Like I'm Good to Great. Actually, got sitting here on my desk.
Good degree. I've
You
seen
know,
that. Yeah,
love
I
that
didn't read it
book.
yet. I have a friend who passed that to me.
One of the best business books ever written.
Mhm.
But it talks about the hedgehog concept, and in there, the hedgehog concept is driven from three circles: what you can be the best in the world at. Some people say what you're really good at, what you're passionate about, and what drives your economic engine, right? And it says the economic engine, not necessarily money, because there's things about like commute and work-life balance and other things beyond just like pure money, right? But certainly money is a huge part of that. Um, and so you want to find those things. Now, here's the interesting thing that happens: almost everything today that you're passionate about doing, you probably didn't like the first time you did it, right? I mean, even go back all the way to like being a kid, right? I didn't love riding a bike when I was 4 years old and didn't know how to ride a bike, right? Like you try something new, it's frustrating, right? Eventually you get over a certain point where now you actually get good enough at it to actually get passionate about it, right? And so this is like one of the struggles that I think all of us have in life is like, how much time do I spend doing something
Mhm.
before I figure out if I'm really going to like it, or not? And I think that's a difficult question to answer. The one answer that I do try to help people is try to get more fundamental in terms of like the root things that you like to do and not look at it just from a career perspective, right? So like
Mhm.
I'll just use myself. So I go way back as a kid. I loved games like Tetris. I loved games like chess. Even like my wife makes fun of me because I'll do like Sudoku or whatever for fun, So I'm always like, I love strategy. I love modeling. I love fitting things of different sizes together and the creativity that it takes, to do that. And I mean, I've always loved to do things in like Excel and those kinds of things. So I try to get to the root. And I'm like, what is it about those things that I enjoy? And it's that strategy and executing on that strategy and coming up with a plan and then seeing the result of the plan from happening. And so I'm trying to get to the root of what do I really enjoy, and also like as a part of that, what am I good at? And then I figure out how does that fit into a job, a career that I want to do. And like just take sales, for instance. I've had a lot of salespeople over the years, and there's not just like a one size fits all. Some person is really like, some of my salespeople are really good because they're very technical and they know the technology extremely well and they can design it and they like to explain it to a customer and help a customer solve a problem. And so they go about their sales differently from someone else that might be highly relational. And they love to connect with people and they love to help people get out of pain when they're in trouble. And then they'll like a lot of times even partner with an engineer or another salesperson that's highly technical to help on that part that they're not as good at, right? So it's like, what's that core competency that you're really good at that you're enjoying doing, and then figuring out how is that going to fit into something.
Yeah.
Getting back to your question though, and actually I got a post coming out on Monday that's talking about when I did my Ironman.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing about like that, and I think the interesting thing about anything that you accomplish big in life, um, is that it's really hard, and work is hard, um, and there's nothing I've done in my life of significance, and the best things in my life, none of them came easy.
Wow.
Having children, being married, and me and my wife are very happily married 95% of the time. And the other percent of the time we're fighting. Um, but like it takes
That's
a lot of
good.
work, and it's a big challenge in
Mhm.
both of those two things. I like
Right.
hiking. I love big challenges. I ultimately enjoy doing my Ironman, but it was really, really hard. And when I was training at 5 a.m. in the dark on some days when I didn't feel like it, like I thought about quitting multiple times, right? But I had a goal in terms of what I wanted to do. And
Mhm.
ultimately, like it was a great accomplishment and a great feeling
Mhm.
and, bucket list type of thing that I was able to do. But it wasn't all fun and games and pleasant the
Right.
whole way,
Yeah.
right? And so, but I knew what I wanted to do. I knew why I wanted to do it. So I'm coming back, or trying to set some foundation on some things to come back to your question, is that, if you have properly identified the business that you want to have and you're working on creating it and you've got that right vision, the answer may be put your head down and work hard and it's not going to be easy. And no one who was really successful just came easy. We hear all these things where we think, oh, it's an overnight success, right? And it's like, no, they've been working on that for 10 years. And then suddenly it finally exploded and they reached a critical mass point.
And you've only been paying attention for the last minute or so. So you think it would happen overnight, right?
Right. Yes. Like all of us, like, there's like these Olympic athletes right now that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm hearing about them for the very first time, but they've been working like probably their whole life training,
young, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So sometimes though, because we don't really watch somebody that closely until all of a sudden they reach success, people have a misunderstanding of how long it takes, to be successful. But on the other side of that, sometimes there is a time to quit, right? And say, you know what? And part of the thing in life, I mean, this comes like, especially from like my behavioral economics. I mean, every decision is a trade-off, right? And this is why I get hyped up on media, because every minute I spend on media is a minute I can't spend with my family or working on business or a spiritual discipline or exercise or something that's really good for me, right? And so, if you're in a job if it's not moving you into the goal of where you're going to want to be, then you're wasting that minute that you could be somewhere else that is getting you there. So that's kind of on one side. Sometimes it's like, hey, you know what? And you can only focus on something. Like we have to, like in our quarterly strategic planning, it's like we got to focus on a few things we're going to do this quarter to improve in the business. Because if we try to do everything at one time, we'll end up doing nothing. And so you got to be focused in what you're doing.
I heard Elon Musk say once too, if you give somebody 6 weeks to complete something, they're going to take 6 weeks to complete it. If you give somebody 2 weeks, even though they have 6 weeks, whatever that time frame that you give yourself is usually what we do just enough effort to reach the goal, right? Most of the time.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it sometimes is a time to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to not do that because I've got another opportunity that moves me closer. And sometimes it's, you got to push through and do hard things. And when you understand why the hard thing is helping you get to your goal, and then you have to put your head down and push through. So it's the kind of the balance of all that. So that's probably the best that I could say without getting into a specific scenario with somebody to actually talk with them and help them work through that.
That makes sense. It's like that person would say, hey, find that purpose, find that goal. Is what you're doing with your time right now leading you up to that goal? And is that goal something that gives you fulfillment? Even though it's hard work right now, let's do that hard work and get to where we need to be, right? That's awesome. Well, hey, thanks, Will. I know we kind of just wrapped up on time, but this was awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time out to meet with us today. And if you don't know Will, please follow him on LinkedIn. His name is Will Slappey. I'll put that on the post here, and we look forward to continue growing our networks together. Thanks for the time today, Will.
Great to see you, William. Have a good one.
Thanks. Take care.